You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYBC.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast. I'm Tony Kinnett.
And I'm Virginia Allen.
And we're going to bring you some of the quick news roundup here live from our beautiful nation's capital. Beautiful because there's not, trash and filth on the streets
Criminals.
as much anymore. Yeah, homeless criminals, the whole thing.
Illegal aliens.
Because we've got some good news here from the beautiful nation's capital wrap. But before we get to that, we got to get into some of the biggest news of the day, and that is what's blowing up your phone constantly. Israel and Qatar. Tell us about it briefly.
Yeah, so this is big. So we learned this morning that the IDF, they carried out a strike in Doha, Qatar. And this is significant. This is the first time that Israel has specifically carried out a targeted strike in Doha. And it wasn't random. They were very targeted towards Hamas. We have known for a very, very long time that Hamas leaders have had operations out of Doha, have been operating out of Doha. These are kind of the top dogs of Hamas. And so Israel launched the strike specifically to kill them, took out multiple of these Hamas leaders. But obviously, Qatar is a sovereign nation, is an ally of the United States. So this is sensitive. It's very sensitive. Qatar has been involved in negotiations for a ceasefire and hostage deal. So they're really considered a neutral partner in this situation. They've been the ones that have been kind of representing, along with Egypt, that Hamas side, the U.S., of course, representing Israel to try and get these agreements for an end to the war, for the release of the remaining now 48 hostages. So for Israel to carry out the strike, really, really big deal, to do it on the sovereign soil of another nation. So the U.S. response, we can talk more about it, but the U.S. has been very careful in how they've responded because they have said Qatar is an ally. They, of course, are a sovereign nation. To carry out a strike on sovereign territory is not something that the U.S. approves of.
Especially considering we have a military installation in Qatar specifically.
Absolutely. And Hamas has to be defeated. President Trump has issued multiple warnings, including as recently as this week, to Hamas, pretty much saying, hey, you guys are out of time. You have no more options, and release the hostages now or else. And so I think the White House has been very careful in how they have responded to this, because there was a lot of thought, especially right away, of was this the or else? Was the U.S. rubber stamping this? Well, no, the U.S. was notified directly beforehand. The White House said they immediately contacted Steve Witkoff and said, hey, you need to contact the Qataris, let them know this is coming, which Steve Witkoff did. And so the U.S. is really seeking to, yes, continue to say we stand with Israel and we stand against Hamas. Hamas must be defeated. And Qatar is a sovereign nation. They're our ally. We stand with them and their sovereignty as well. And we do not approve of a strike on another nation's sovereign territory.
Now let's actually break out into a little bit of maybe some additional context. Now, I can't necessarily tell you exactly where this particular information is coming from to protect both the identity and the organization of this individual. But we can confirm that Qatar was able to notify specific individuals associated with the Qatari government, as well as with key industry assets, whatever that means, who were able to vacate the area of the Israeli Defense Force strike several hours in advance of the strike. Now, from what we understand so far, Hamas had no idea that this was coming. Apparently, there were reporters from Al Jazeera that were trying to get in touch, and the leaders from Hamas weren't answering their phone. No word as to whether or not they tried their pagers.
But
appreciate that. But as for right now, the international community is reacting rather strangely. There's a Dutch politician who called it rather brave. Qatar itself kind of came out in a way that a lot of Middle Eastern nations do when Israel does something that they secretly like, but they also can't like it officially because they're a Muslim nation. They have to say, well, this was a cowardly attack and a violation of international law, and we're going to do what the U.S. House of Representatives does. We're going to start an investigation. And then that's the last that you ever hear of it, which is incredible. Did you see Fetterman's response?
I was fascinated, and you were the one who brought this up, but Fetterman, he really ceases to amaze. I love the fact that he so often weighs in on these issues.
Senator John Betterman of Pennsylvania, the last sane Democrat. Well, when he's speaking, voting, another issue, but at least on social media.
Yeah, it's entertaining to say the least, and it's heartening that someone is willing to sometimes take opinions and positions that vary from his very far left base.
In this case, announcing that he was pleased with the Israeli official confirming the Hamas leadership no longer with us here on this living earth, with a picture of Winnie the Pooh waiting for his hero honey, just...
How better to say you're pleased than a photo of Winnie the Pooh dancing in front of a honeypot?
I will say that some of the analysts that I used to kind of trust on the open source intelligence front, they've come forth. All of the Obama era intelligence officials, they've stepped into the limelight to announce how disappointed they are in these actions. They're always so disappointed with Israel. So much for the expansion of the Abraham Accords. Virginia, you've been covering the Middle East and foreign policy in general for a while. How hard was the entire United States Trump diplomacy in the first administration fighting for Qatar to be a member of the Abraham Accords?
Well, I think the point here that people are like, oh, like, gosh, the Israelis have so isolated Qatar and made enemies with them. No, I think to your point, Tony, Qatar at the end of the day likely is not that upset that Hamas was targeted. Now, there's that initial offense of, gosh, you did this on our soil. But let's be honest, no one likes Hamas. No one likes Hamas.
Well, I mean, Qatar, even though funding Hamas for a long time, I think they're looking for a bit of an off-ramp. And I know this isn't the quick news thing. We're really drifting more into analysis. But again, this is why I had you on. I wanted to talk about this, and there's no better way to talk about it than with someone who spends her time covering all of these feeds. You poor, unfortunate soul. I mean, you and I have both been in Israel in the last year. There's a lot of chaos that is never ending. Netanyahu stressed the operation was entirely Israeli-led and Israel, quote, takes full responsibility, end quote. However, I will give Trump the highest level of praise here. And this is, he has given a level of bona fides to his final warning. So, there's been something that the Trump administration, Trump comes out and he says, here we are, it's your final warning. If you don't do what I want, then it's gonna be hell and you're gonna live there. And that is the final warning, right? Sometimes then the final warning turns into action, Iran, right? Sometimes though, like with Ukraine and Russia, there's a bit of a delay, maybe there's a bit of a lead through.
Yeah.
This case though, Trump on February the 7th, that being 2 days ago, said, hey, last warning.
September.
Right.
I mean, September the 7th. You said February. That's okay.
Oh, sorry. September the 7th. Yeah.
Days. They all run together.
Months. I tell you what, to quote Joe Biden, soda. So, yeah, it's good to see Trump go through with this.
Yeah.
Hamas said no. I believe they had said it was a, quote, cowardly surrender treaty. The cowardly is in the quote surrender treaty. I think I'm paraphrasing there. Also, I don't speak Arabic. But in this case, it is good. Trump delivering the final warning right now with Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, moving
Secretary
forward.
of War.
Sorry. Thank you so much. The Secretary of War conducting operations from the Gulf of America.
That's right.
It's important to recognize that this peace through strength has teeth and is not just a bark of don't from the prior administration.
Absolutely. Well, I do think, that's the question, and was the question right after the fact of like, okay, is this what Trump was talking about? And I think the interesting thing is it doesn't necessarily, at least to the public and the comments out of the White House, it doesn't seem like this was the action that the president was necessarily talking about. And yet the timing is obviously significant. So then it's like, all right, well, if this wasn't the action the president was talking about, because it seems that, Israel's very clear they acted alone here, it was just them, then what was the president talking about? Is there more action to come? Certainly, the U.S. is not stopping Israel from continuing its plans to take Gaza City.
Right.
They're continuing to push for a ceasefire. They're continuing to push for the release of all hostages. The plan right now that is said to be on the table is one that would cause an initial ceasefire that would, on day one, the U.S. is saying every single hostage, living and dead, is to be released on that day one, and in exchange for a number of Palestinian, really, terrorists. And then, in the subsequent days, there would be negotiation for a permanent ceasefire. surprise, surprise, we're all twiddling our thumbs waiting for Hamas to agree. Usually how this works is the U.S. puts forward a plan. Often Israel says okay, and then Hamas makes some pretty significant changes and comes back and says, we will agree to this. And then when Israel says no, everyone throws up their arms and says, Israel won't agree to a deal. Well, it's because Hamas significantly changed the terms of that deal to be, very much so in their favor and not for the people of Israel. So, I mean, the buck stops with Hamas. They've had the option now to end this war since October 8th if they release the hostages, and they've chosen not to.
Yeah, and I want to add this little piece in here that I think is worth it before we head to commercial. What you're seeing the Trump administration bring forward is a major cleanup operation of prior administration's policies. We saw this right after the Obama administration, a complete reset of how the U.S. operates on the global stage. And all of the things that we're warned about were going to happen don't happen. Instead, we see major NATO allies praising the United States, the head of NATO calling Trump daddy. Seriously.
He called you daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No?
Do you
He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
That was wild.
Just wild.
Wild.
And I know producer Nick's going to put that clip in there. So now that we look at this new administration after the Biden team, the reset that has occurred, I know the Russo-Ukrainian situation is ongoing, but what the president and his team have been able to affect either through America or through proxies and allies, it's incredible. There's no other word for it.
It's huge. I mean, I think you've really gone from, it's almost humorous in a sad way when you compare and contrast the 4 years of Biden to what we have now, when it really was talk at best out of the Biden administration. Very soft language, a lot of sort of wrist slapping to an administration that has been very, very bold. And Trump has been very clear about what his actions are and will be. And of course, his major priority remains to bring about an end to the war in Israel, and then also, of course, between Russia and Ukraine.
And we're going to talk about some of the other inheritances and how those are going, because some new revisions, some new data coming through, some new fistfights. It's a wild time for news. We're going to bring it to you. Don't go anywhere. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WYBC. Unfortunately, I have to begin this segment with Stephen Kent from Geeky Stoics, Elise McHugh, our culture commentary expert, by announcing that I have been kind of radicalized by the video following the Charlotte stabbing, the Irana Zarutska killing, and the look that she gives her killer as she's bleeding out and nobody comes to help her. And so right away, and I'm sorry to just immediately come in and kill a fun culture segment that we had planned. You had an article that you shared that I think we have to talk about, and we have to talk about it right now. It can't wait. We need to discuss this, and I need the millennial and the kind of Gen Xy side of society to weigh in. I need the youths as well to figure out where we're going. This sin of empathy, this obsession with finding the bestie goody goodness of everyone. Tell us about this, Stephen.
Well, the piece that I had flagged for you is by Jeffrey Ingersoll over at the Daily Caller. It's titled "Toxic Empathy is the Biggest Threat to America Right Now."
It's a bold claim.
We need men to stop it. And, you know, the claim that Jeffrey is making, and it's something that I have felt before and I have heard before, is that generally we're living in a state right now where America has been taken over by a professional female class. The people who are running Cracker Barrel and driving Star Wars into the ground and driving male teachers out of the classroom, feminizing every aspect of culture. And with
not traditionally feminine ways, but this kind of pseudo you go girl weird fetishization of women.
Not just you go girl, but I mean like the general attitude being that every time there is bad behavior at play, it can simply be corrected with, you know, a little bit of love and a hand on the shoulder. And like that's the general attitude. And that's women's nature. You know, we on the right, we believe in men and women's nature. That's what makes us right in this moment in politics.
Nice.
We are of the belief that women are actually quite good at this. And so when they achieve a great amount of cultural and political power, that becomes the mode of politics. Overcorrection rather than punishment, rather than the closed fist that, I don't know, masculine men might be more inclined to deliver as a solution to problems such as a mentally ill person being out on the streets instead of locked up where he can't hurt people.
So I want to pivot that to the new generation. There's been a lot of new surveys that have come out suggesting what men and women in Generation Z are finding a lot of values in. It doesn't seem like the kind of millennial age of how gender is viewed, how roles and empathy are viewed, are kind of leading the charge anymore. What are you seeing on the ground there with you young kids?
Well, it's very interesting you bring up that new NBC poll that came out on Monday, because we see with Gen Z, we're so disaffected by everything that it's not the gender divides of like raising a family versus, supporting a family, but both men and women on the right and the left in Gen Z, based on this poll, are really prioritizing their personal success, their personal careers, and they're just forgetting all of those things that make you inherently female and male. And that could be in part because of the way that the culture has told us, like, you have to ignore everything that makes you inherently female and male. And that's how you get stuff like toxic empathy, especially towards criminal males, and just a whole pot that we could get into.
Yeah, and I think with, this incident in Charlotte, there are a couple things I think about it. One, this is really out of character for Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm from this area. That train in particular is a pretty safe place for students to travel. These things are anomalies in this part of the country or in this particular city. But by and large, what we're seeing with this person who was known to be mentally ill, who had told his family and medical professionals in a 911 call that he thought there was something inside of him trying to get out, which, I mean, to me, again, I'm like, demonic presence, but
confirmed that he attacked his sister as well. And again,
violent.
I just want to point out as well, producer Daniel, also being from North Carolina, we were on the phone right after this video had come out. And, he told me just briefly that it did shock. There's an element of kind of the still baby boomer held South in the coastal regions that's still so traditional and it's common sense that this kind of stuff is unusual to the extreme, almost, these kind of crimes.
I think what's in the background here is the broader debate that is picked up about involuntary detainment of people who are suffering with extreme mental illness and are living out on the streets and threatening people when they walk by. And one of the reasons, going back to men and women, that I think that this exists is because most of the use of involuntary detainment for mentally ill people, we often hear about that with the case of depressed and mentally ill housewives in the 50s, 60s, early 70s.
Those reels where the lady's like, my husband's coming home soon, and like the kitchen magnets spell like crude words.
This was a whole thing. And after the sexual revolution and sort of women entered the workforce and politics, this kind of became verboten. The idea that you could just, say somebody is bipolar or schizophrenic and get rid of them.
Like the red flag law concerns, but with mental health in the mid 20th century.
Yeah. But then we leave these people out and we don't help them in any way, shape, or form. We leave them out in the elements. We leave them out to starve and eventually to lose control of their faculties and murder someone. I honestly feel bad for everybody involved here. The victim, I feel bad for the killer. Like, the killer didn't deserve to be left like this.
The manifesto
to cause harm to people.
The manifesto of the transgender shooter in Minneapolis.
I'm very much the same way.
Again, the mania.
My heart breaks for this person. These people are being betrayed by this element that we are calling toxic empathy, where in order to love somebody, we never have to use any sort of force or persuasion or taking away their choices in order to demonstrate a love for them.
Well, it's interesting you talk about being betrayed by a system, because that is something that I've heard on both the left and the right in terms of this stabbing, but it's not necessarily the same system. The left is saying they've been abused and betrayed by the criminal justice system and they just need a big hug and restorative justice. But then the right is like, no, they've been betrayed by the culture that we have created over the past 60, 70 years and the approaches that we take to like mental health and criminals and toxic empathy totally exists. But then it's like, where is that toxic empathy when it comes to like, or where is that empathy period when it comes to like the 23-year-old girl who's sitting on the train, or the man who's told, the teenage boy who's told like, hey, you can't say that to a girl, you can't Snapchat a girl like that. But then we let these criminal men go run free and kill these 23-year-old girls. I was on a train when I read this. I was on DC public transit when I read this. I'm a 23-year-old girl too. This made me extremely upset. And toxic empathy is the exact problem. Jeffrey Ingersoll put it exactly right. It just makes me so upset.
I'll pivot here with that to something that I'm really encouraged in the. So in Indiana, I'm going to take this completely off topic. We did not have this on the script. In my church in Newcastle, Indiana, does this thing called a Harvest Teen Rally every single year. And they work with a bunch of other local churches, and they bring this huge tent out into this gorgeous farm in eastern central Indiana. And they have this big, huge rally of teenagers. They hear a couple of services, and there's a ton of really cool games, and it's a wonderful day for teens. It's a phenomenal thing. They've done it for decades. I went to it a bunch when I was in high school. And the thing that the speaker, Jim Shetler, the preacher who came down and spoke at the Harvest Teen Rally this year, this was just this last Saturday, said he had not seen such engagement from teens in any of the years he's been with it. Man's getting up there. And he's not seen this engagement. There is such a hunger for a return to common sense values that don't lead to this weird empathetic, again, because it's not real empathy, it's this blind affirmation, listlessness, hedonism. I know obviously with geeky Stoics, you'd appreciate that. We've talked about this a lot. There is such a yearning in the younger generations for what older generations were able to take for granted, not in a bad way. They were able to take it for granted because it had been passed down and instilled, and it was so natural to them that we spent our childhood seeing it ripped away from us, and you almost didn't get to experience the last vestiges of the Daniel pennies that would always be around when something got out of hand.
We were talking about this right before we started filming, but we were like, what would each of us do if we were in that situation? Would we be like the many people who are on the train who just were paralyzed by fear, which honestly, I don't think is the right thing to do, but I understand it completely because, again, you don't want to get Daniel pennied. Or would you hop in? Me as a woman, what would I even be able to do without getting harmed as well? And it's just, we don't know what to do because if you like make justice happen when the lawmakers won't and your government won't, then you'll get
There's a lot of things going on in the video. I mean, in addition to the violent act, there is the everyone turning away. There's two people within arm's reach of the victim who don't even rush to go help apply any pressure to the wound. They simply walk away from the victim so as not to perhaps incur harm themselves. And then you see people looking up from their phones and they're like, oh my gosh, what happened? But there are the people who did see what happened and they still don't move to try and detain this person, possibly because he has a knife and that's scary, but also again the Daniel Penny factor. We have discouraged people from acting heroically in the public sphere, and that is namely something that has been stripped away from most American men because they have greater capacity to do this and they are afraid to use that power.
And I want to make this clear in the video that the killer, he stabs her and then he gets up and he walks away past people. For some reason, when I originally read the story, I believed that perhaps that she had bled out, again, eyes shut forward, passing out quietly. She's wide-eyed awake, stares at her attacker as he walks off. And the lady next does nothing. She's bleeding out. She could have been saved. She could have been saved. I am struck by this, that there is a man behind the killer who I'm more angry at in this moment in time. He just got up and walked right behind the killer right away with his ear pods in, just, walking away, whatever. He could have saved her. Even if he just would have put pressure on the wound, he could have saved her. And I think that as a man, I'm furious with him especially. You're a man. I'm not talking about the killer. The man behind that got up and just walked away. What a coward. What a coward.
And we talked about this also in the beginning of the segment about women being a lot more empathetic and a lot more caring towards other people, and that's their solution to a lot of problems.
So if there were other females on the train, why didn't
where was the caring here?
Where was the caring?
Yeah. Rush to
It's
help
just
this
a
person.
very frustrating situation. It's so sad. My mom immediately called me after she found out about this and was like, if you're taking the metro, don't do that anymore. I have to unless you want me to have a car here, Mom. But seriously, it's just so many missteps happened in this situation.
Men are not being told right now at the highest levels that things are expected of them and that they are needed to perform these functions. The only
fatherhood and great motherhood matter.
The only reason that we're having a conversation across this country right now about the National Guard being deployed into communities is because men are not policing their own streets, cleaning up their own corners.
The liberal women in D.C. are not used to seeing men stand up for justice and what's right and be protectors.
I think it goes back to just the ideas of the founding that, this country is fit for a virtuous people. And as you lose virtue, as you lose courage in the public square, then you're going to have government and authoritarian forces move in to fill the void left by the people. So I'm not saying we're about to enter an authoritarian phase, but this is a symptom of that.
This is the vacuum in which authoritarianism has entered in historical precedent. I will say this before we close, because we've gone completely off where we were supposed to go and completely over time, but it's an important conversation, and I can't apologize for that. There is a young man in Georgia. His name is King Randall. His first name King, last name Randall. He's the founder of a school called the X for Boys. Back when I was in Chalkboard Review, we interviewed him early on, and he fills a fatherhood role for a lot of young, at-risk young men in Georgia. And he teaches them, if there's something going on, somebody is getting attacked or something, you step up. You make sure that you act respectfully, responsibly, calmly, in control, because you have a responsibility, a duty to your community. Again, there are young men and women who are craving that kind of foundation. And this is what excites me about the role that Generation X and the baby boomer generation has to play. Finally, the kids are listening. That Karen crew, the Cracker Barrel CEOs or the Star Wars groups, that crew, again, the hyper feminine whatever, they're being cast out of society. We're just being told, the Karen at the Phillies game, right?
Yeah.
Just told, get out of here. Nobody believes that's worth anything anymore. Now the elders now have the opportunity they should have had a while ago, but it was stripped from them, to be that model for younger generations to raise something that actually puts this country in a future that isn't that vacuum that brings in authoritarianism.
At the same time, we're having this conversation about toxic empathy, which is really spurred on by Allie Beth Stuckey's book of the exact same name. Ben Shapiro is doing his book tour talking about lions and scavengers. He's going to be here at the Heritage Foundation next week to talk to Kevin Roberts. And in his first 3 chapters, he actually talks about the civic importance of empathy in his book. And it is because we need to be able to see the human being in our fellow citizen at all times. We can't have a free country, we can't have a republic unless we see the people who we are fellow citizens with as people, especially when they are masked by other forms of identity that we don't recognize, viewpoints that we hate. It is actually really important. We will not have a country without it. But
well said.
Like all things, it can descend into toxicity and serve no one.
Elise, a final thought?
Final thought for me is we see all this big conversation about toxic empathy. And like you said, there is a hunger within our generation because we've been so deprived of just masculine men sticking up for women and all that kind of stuff. And you even see this bleed into the culture a little bit, even with these liberal tastemakers, singers, Olivia Rodrigo, Sabrina Carpenter, even the people who run these big meme pages. They won't admit it, but everywhere in our art, in our music, they'll be cheeky and coy and a little sarcastic about saying, oh, I just want a man who's going to stick up for me. I'm so tired of these soy boys. But it's a really real feeling that we see even in just the lightness of pop culture. And I'm really interested to see where this goes.
I mean, it's through parody and small jokes that real needs and concerns are expressed. It's why parody and satire is so powerful. With that said, we've gone a little over time. Elise McHugh, our culture expert over at the Daily Signal and a co-host on Problematic Women. Stephen Kent of Geeky Stoics. A lot of great success coming to your channel over there.
Excelsior.
Absolutely. Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. I'm Tony Kinnett.
And I'm Virginia Allen.
And let's dig into a little bit more on the Quick News Roundup live from your nation's capital, because we have been beating the bricks, pounding the pavement, smacking the sidewalks. licking the interstates.
Oh, wow.
In order to get you new information on what's honestly a pretty big bombshell, I'd have to argue, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Some new revisions in, same kind of old staff, but some new revisions here. This is pretty crazy. Between April of 2024 and March of 2025, 911,000 jobs in the negative were created. So in essence, what that means is that we are in a position where the labor market has been really, really rough back during the Biden administration when everyone was told that things were starting to recover and normalize. So there was this narrative that was created right after Trump came into the office that, all right, now we're going to see Trump kill this recovering economy that Biden had. Essentially, what's being pushed out by a lot of economists, even some that are at Brookings Center on the left side of the aisle, Trump inherited far worse in an average job gains revision, 71,000 a month, instead of what Biden was touting as 147,000 jobs created per month. That's a huge revision.
It's a huge revision. Well, and we know that many of the jobs that the Biden administration was touting had created were part-time jobs, and that so many Americans were having to pick up, multiple of these kind of part-time or contract gigs just in order to make ends meet. And so, when we were looking at those numbers out of the Biden administration, it was really only telling a piece of the story, not the whole pie. And I will say, I think, economic things, it's one of the, of course, great litmus tests to how the country is doing, and it can be pretty slow moving. It takes a long time to turn around an economy that was headed down. It takes a long time to create new permanent job positions. So it's a big ship to right, so to speak.
It really is. So according to this graph provided by Heather Long, she's the chief economist over at Navy Federal. She's also a columnist at Washington Post. So in case you're wondering, not the most conservative, hard-hitted red meat economists, one might say. You can see in this particular graph, I know graphs are not the most exciting things, but it really, really matters here. 2020 was the big pandemic when everything shut down, and job creation, which really started to pick up in the second half of Trump's first term, didn't really stall until Biden's big economic packages came around in 21 and 2022. Then everything plummeted, about the time that Pete Buttigieg wasn't building electric charging stations with the billions he was given, or we sank a bunch of money into that Gaza pier that sank into the Mediterranean, It's really wild to see this. Again, we were told.
Yeah.
You and I were brought onto network media hits. We were told overtly the market is recovering, things are really great. And we were saying, well, even then, if you look at the numbers that weren't revised at that point, it's a really low recovery. Now it was just a blatant lie. It was all illusory. It was smoke and mirrors to the nth degree.
Which is just wild. I think when you actually look at the numbers and you see things like that graph, like, wow.
Look at these. Look at these revisions. Tell some of the fine people about the industries that actually lost it. It's
biggest.
Bonkers.
Okay, so we got the biggest revisions. We got hospitality, 176,000.
Down.
Wholesale trade, 110,000.
Down.
Retail, 126,000.
Down.
Manufacturing, 95,000.
Put an asterisk there. Down.
Yep. Information, that seems like a very broad category, but information, 67,000.
Down.
And then other services, 51,000.
Other, down. And that's fourth down and a penalty for a false start. So I want to talk a little bit about the manufacturing kick here. The Biden administration pumped all of these resources into very weird manufacturing contracts and tax write-offs for various organizations around the country, like, let's just say, the Hyundai Motor Group that promised under the Biden administration and in collaboration with Brian Kemp, although this was headed up by Biden's Department of Labor, that they would get a bunch of big tax write-offs if Hyundai got full control to come build this beautiful battery facility in Georgia, where they then brought 400-ish illegal immigrants, 300 of them from South Korea, instead of hiring American workers. So they manipulated the system, they fudged it. So why does that matter? Guys, those jobs are not being added as manufacturing changes until the revision. Food processing plant employment. And I'm not just talking about in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm talking about in the major food processing states. So these include Nevada, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Eastern Virginia, Eastern West Virginia, New York, Pennsylvania, Florida. Yeah, I actually have these memorized. Don't ask why. It's a long story. These are states who we have seen direct correlations to their manufacturing revisions change based on suspected illegal immigrant book cookery. And you say, well, why do you suspect book cookery? You know, is there like aluminum foil on your head? Have we not just spent 2 weeks looking at all of the inner city mayors who have lied about their crime statistics by merging things when convenient to push a political narrative?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of one of the oldest games in the book often. I mean, that's a tactic that has been long used is there's a lot of ways to manipulate numbers. And people love numbers because there's something that feels very concrete about it. But we also know from examples like this that they're pretty easy to fudge sometimes.
So we do have a little something for you that pushes back against the stupid manipulation of numbers. And of course, I'm talking about the one, the only Tom Homan, part man, part bulldog, part the Hulk. He went on with Morning Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski. And it's like, well, why would you talk about MSNBC? Guys, this clip is incredible.
I see on the show this morning you have Governor Healy talking about ICE doing enforcement operations at a church. False. Didn't happen.
They were parked there. They did not do an operation there. She said they were parked in a public space legally.
But to say that and to push that out there puts fear in the immigrant community. So let me tell you what's happening.
That puts fear in the community. Right. To park the ICE agent's vehicle
they're on a
near
public
a church.
street.
They're on a public street. She said
they're on a public street
sir.
waiting to respond to a criminal alien release pulled aside the road. Let me tell you, in the last couple of days, what's happened in Boston. They arrested Victor Gomez Perez, a 33-year-old criminal alien from Guatemala, with charges of aggravated rape, assault and battery with dangerous weapon, indecent assault and battery on a victim 14 years or younger. They arrested Kaylee Espinosa, a 34-year-old criminal alien from Colombia, with charges of aggravated assault on a pregnant victim. They arrested Joshua Gonzalez, a 24-year-old criminal alien from Dominican Republic, with charges for trafficking heroin, morphine, opium, resisting police, disorderly conduct, and drug distribution. They also arrested Samuel Armando Barrero, a 20-year-old criminal illegal alien from Guatemala, pending charges for assault and battery on a child. So Mayor Wu and Governor Healy, they ought to be calling ICE and thanking them for making their streets safer, for protecting their communities and taking these people off the street. They've turned a blind eye to this. They're sanctuary cities. Sanctuaries, cities and sanctuary states are sanctuaries for criminals. Give ICE access to the jail to arrest a bad guy in the jail rather than have to go in the community to find them. Because when you go in the community and find them, it puts ICE officers at greater risk. It puts the community at greater risk. It puts the alien at greater risk because anything can happen on a street arrest. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to prioritize public safety threats. But when you got governors and mayors who are releasing these public safety threats every day into the community, that causes the crime rate, and we've seen some terrible incidents in the last few days where innocent victims are murdered. This past year, I've seen innocent Americans raped and murdered by people who are not supposed to be here. So rather than going back and forth and say, well, ICE has got a car parked near a church, that is ridiculous. You're out there looking for people like this, exactly what they're doing.
Well, I would argue that actually that the ICE vehicle parked outside a Spanish mass is a frightening sight, given what has happened in this country. I also, with respect, sir, thank you for the information that you have shared on this show, but we would appreciate all of the information. All of it. All of the data that you say you have.
I've done this show several times. Every time on your show, I speak with integrity, I speak with honesty, and I speak with facts. The bottom line is, because of all this false narrative, and you using the term disappearing people is
that's
disgusting.
What's happened. That happened to the group that was sent to El Salvador.
U.S. citizens get arrested every day. U.S. citizens get arrested by police every day. Are they being disappeared? No, their laws are being enforced. They're being arrested. They're being put in detention because they committed a criminal offense.
Not like what you're doing.
It's
Not even close.
We're enforcing the law and arresting people here in violation of law that are public safety threats. That's not disappearing people. That's enforcing the laws of this country and making this country safer.
Why, if you're MSNBC, would you invite on Tom Homan?
You know what's going to happen.
You know what's going to happen. I know. It's like whenever Margaret Brennan over CBS, she brings on J.D. Vance for the Sunday show, and you can just hear him or Marco Rubio in the background cracking their knuckles like, all right, let's do this thing. And then you hear the boxing, you hear the bell just ding.
Ding, yep.
And in this case, I'm astounded that they continue to push this People Are Being Disappeared Act. Is there anyone yet that we know of that has effectively been genuinely disappeared? I'm every one of the people that has a slight question about their status, they're national news.
That was a father from Maryland, Tony.
Or a father from Colorado. That was a father of a Marine. It's like, wait a minute, isn't that guy running at police with an on weed whacker?
Yeah. No, the instances in every single instance where the left has cried foul, DHS, ICE, Tom Homan, President Trump have been right there to say, these are the receipts. This is the criminal history of these individuals. By the way, this is when they entered the country illegally. We have proof that they're here illegally. And FYI, if you're here illegally, you don't get to stay in the country.
Crazy concept.
Number one.
Astounding.
And then if you commit crimes, well, guess what? You're further held accountable. And Tom Homan, he has never been one to mince words. And I mean, from the get-go, it's been very clear. We are prioritizing the arrest and removal of criminal illegal aliens. And though, if we happen to come across you, as we are prioritizing those criminals and you haven't committed a crime, but you're here illegally, well, you're not off the table.
He also makes, a pretty accurate point. And I got to say, a pretty accurate point because we have seen cases where this they've made the request was filled, no problem, no big raids. They have asked, hey, local city, we believe you have these illegal immigrants who have committed these violent crimes in custody.
Yep.
Will you share with us the data? Will you allow us to come pick them up? Because they are not legal immigrants. They are illegal immigrants who have committed violent crimes. They're in our jurisdiction.
Yep.
They're ours, not yours. So some cities have said, yeah, here you go. And no big raids, no cacophony of insanity, whatever. It's just smooth sailing. And then you have Michelle Wu of Boston, who says, we're not going to do any of this.
Yep.
And then as soon as ICE moves into, because they still have to come in and uphold federal law no matter what, as SCOTUS affirmed for what is it, like the 10th time they've affirmed this exact thing?
Keep affirming it.
Yeah, my goodness. Now, yet again, we have a situation in which ICE has to sweep through and be put at risk, all for the same arrests to eventually be made of violent sex offenders.
Yep. Well, and it not only puts ICE agents at greater risk, it puts community members that could happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time at greater risk. People keep sounding off about all the fear this is creating. Okay, well, if this was happening behind closed doors in a jail, then you wouldn't have individuals on the streets being fearful because, well, it would be happening in jails in a safe, enclosed environment where everyone is protected. The illegal aliens themselves are much safer. Just all of those factors, all those moving pieces are taken away. It would save the U.S. taxpayer money because it takes a lot less agents to arrest someone in the confines of a jail than it does out on the streets. It really is, it's just political showmanship for these leftist leaders to say we're not going to cooperate with ICE because everyone loses when they don't cooperate with ICE.
Now, I don't really care for political showmanship, but general professional showmanship, I'm quite fond of.
Sure.
And one of the people that we're fond of over at the Daily Signal is Megyn Kelly. You like Megyn Kelly?
She's brilliant.
She is brilliant. And I found out recently that some of her team is a fan not only of the Daily Signal, but the Tony Kinnett cast.
Well, how about that? Everybody's a fan of the Tony Kinnett cast.
That's really nice of you to say. And we're not paying you to say it, which is even better. Well, Megyn Kelly's going on tour. She's going on a big 10-city tour. And her staff reached out to us and said, look, while tickets are going on sale Wednesday, tomorrow, for the general public right now, for the rest of us, and by the rest of us, I mean the audience of the Daily Signal and the Tony Kinnett cast, you get first dibs. If you go to megynkelly.com, MEGYNKELLY.com, you put in exclusive pre-sale code MK2025, MK2025, you get first access to the tickets, including a limited number of VIP packages that include meet and greet opportunities and things. They're doing this for our audience.
Wow.
Really? I mean, this isn't like
special.
You can't just copy and find this other like shows and places. They really did this one for us. I'm kind of shocked.
Do you have the list of cities that they're going to? Am I putting you on the spot?
We do have the list of cities, and
goodness.
they include several cities in Texas, New York, Florida, Georgia, California, and Arizona.
Wow. All over the United States.
That's right. I'm not going to read off those 10 cities because I did that yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. So MK 2025, you go to megynkelly.com. Again, MEGYNKELLY.com. You slap in that MK 2025 code, you get ticket access early. That's right. Just for you guys. All right. One final thing before we go for the day. I'm bushing up on time as it is, but it doesn't matter. Did you see Trump go off on, that NBC White House correspondent over going to war with Chicago?
It's, as a reporter, this is one thing that you don't want to do. This is a little messy. We should roll it.
Here you go.
Fake news. When you say that, darling, that's fake news.
Well, why would the Department of Defense?
Listen, be quiet. Listen. You don't listen. You never listen. That's why you're second grade. We're not going to war. We're going to clean up our cities. We're going to clean them up so they don't kill 5 people every weekend. That's not war. That's common sense.
I'm going to be honest with you. He is being very generous to Chicago. 5 murders a weekend in Chicago that would be an outbreak of peace in the Midwest. I mean, really, I don't think there's been, it's wild. It's wild.
It's tragic. Well, I mean, just listening to that, you feel uncomfortable for that reporter to have that smackdown from the president. You don't want to be that reporter whose career, as far as working in the White House, might be a little bit limited at this point when the president of the United States has just told you are second rate for a question that you have asked. Our president certainly does not mince words.
And neither should you. And you should not mince your words by sending us a message over at the Tony Kinnett Cast. You go to TonyKinnett.com. You leave a comment in the comments section. I don't know, telling us what words you don't mince. That sounds like a very bad piece of advice. But I don't know. Maybe we just need more of those kind of show closing ceremony. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, closing type statements. Virginia Allen, thank you so much for joining us for
always a joy,
little Tony Kinnett Cast today.
It's a good time.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be back tomorrow, back at the home studio. It's a busy week, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of cool things to bring you. I'm Tony Kinnett.
And I'm Virginia Allen.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.